Right, everybody, here we go. Let's get real for a minute today. You didn't build your business just to be needed every minute of the day, right? You didn't hire a team just to become their lifeline, and you definitely didn't create a vision for your company so that it would stall the moment that you stepped away. But if that's what's happening, if your team moves slower when you're not around, if decisions get stuck, if energy dips, and if the culture feels thinner when you're not physically in the room, then we have a problem. Good news, it's not a people problem. It's a design problem. Because culture doesn't just show up when you said the right things one time. It shows up when you built the container for it to live. Because culture that lives beyond you never happens by accident. It happens when you stop being the culture carrier and start building culture carriers. Now, this is where most leaders get stuck, especially the ones who care deeply. They've done the hard work. They built the business and they carried the vision. They even tried to show up as a good leader, right? Clear communicator, empathetic owner. But every time they try to take a step back, things stall. Morale dips, ownership fades, and when that happens, tensions rise. So they tell themselves, I just need to be a little bit more present, or I just need to lead a few more meetings, or I'll show up more consistently. But showing up more actually isn't the answer. Because at some point, you stop scaling your business and you start babysitting your culture. Now that's not growth, you guys. That's dependency on a leadership filter. And if you're here for legacy, for impact, for ripple effect that reaches well beyond your calendar, then it's time to shift how you actually lead culture. Now, you don't do it by being louder. You do it by being more intentional with what you build. Culture should not need your presence to stay alive. It should be so deeply designed into the way you hire, train, communicate, and reinforce that it keeps breathing even when you're silent. Now that's what we're building in this step of empowerment design. We're not chasing vibes, we're installing systems. Because culture isn't a feeling, it's a framework. One of the clients I worked with, a construction company that had right around 40 employees, they came to me with a question that I will never forget. They said, how do I make sure that this company still feels like ours when we're not in the room? Now, it wasn't said in a controlling way. It was said actually in a really soulful way. The owners wanted the values to stick, the energy, the way people talk to each other, the way that clients felt when their employees were on site. But they were expanding. They decided to open a second location. They were adding more people, and with that, more distance. And their biggest fear was watching the very heart of the business disappear for the sake of growth. What they were really asking me, though, was this: how do you design a culture that scales? And my answer: you don't scale culture. You scale the design of culture. Now, that might sound like just semantics. Maybe it is. But maybe it's also everything. Sometimes the smallest shifts in language hold the power to reshape the way we lead, live, and change. What if the just semantics are actually the doorway to something that finally sticks? You don't just tell people what you care about. You build systems that reflect it, protect it, and then pass it on without you needing to repeat yourself every single day. So we started by naming the invisible. Every leader in the company defined one simple thing: what good culture actually meant in real behavior. Not abstract values, but real behaviors, real decisions, real patterns. And then we looked at where those things already lived or didn't live in the company. Were they a part of onboarding? Were they reinforced in the meeting cadence? Were they recognized in real time? Were they showing up in client interactions, not just internal conversations? From that point, we started embedding. We created a first day ritual for new hires, not a packet, a ritual. The site lead took them out to lunch and told them the story of why the company existed, not just what they did. They were introduced to 3 core behaviors that mattered more than any tool, title, or skill. And they were told exactly how decisions get made in the company, how feedback gets given, and how problems actually get solved. We didn't just create a vibe, we created a pattern, and then we kept it alive through rhythm. Every team meeting started with a very short story, what we called a culture echo, a real moment from the week where someone lived the values without being told, where someone took ownership for a mistake before being asked, where someone helped a teammate without being prompted, and sometimes even when someone told the truth, even when it was hard. Every echo became a ripple. And those ripples, they added up fast. Culture became something that you could feel, but also track. And if you can track it, you can measure it and you can improve it. Now, 6 months later, the second location, fully live. And the owner wasn't involved in the day-to-day. When I asked one of those new hires, what's it like working here? They said, I've never been a part of a team that feels like this. That's what it means to design culture that lives well beyond you. It means the founder becomes the architect, not the enforcer. And the team becomes the voice. And the culture becomes self-reinforcing over and over again. Let me give you another quick story. One of my clients, an agency owner, was known for her fierce loyalty and deep, deep care for her team. But she was exhausted. Every misstep actually landed on her desk, and every morale issue became her problem. Every interpersonal conflict came to her like a confessional booth. And she asked me, why does everyone come to me for everything? So, me being me, I asked her a question back. Have you ever shown them how to carry culture for each other? And all I got was silence. So, we built a culture coaching cadence. Every month, one team member facilitated a 20-minute discussion on one of the company values. They shared a story of how that value has helped them grow. And then they opened it up. How are we doing with this value? Where are we missing the mark? What would living this value more fully look like for us? The owner stopped being the voice of culture. The employees became it. The leaders did. And the conversations, they deepened. The ownership spread way out and the conflicts went down. And the team started holding each other without escalation. Now, my friends, that is design. Here's the most beautiful part. None of this required a reorganization. No new AHR tools. Not even a culture consultant. It just required the decision to stop carrying culture alone and start building a system that lets you breathe without it. Now, that's what cultural cohesion means within empowerment design. It's not about forcing people to act a certain way. It's about designing the environment that invites it. Because here's the hard truth that no one wants to talk about. When culture depends on charisma, it dies when you leave the room. When it depends on clarity, it scales without you. Clarity is what allows culture to live in process, in rhythm, and in daily decisions. Clarity is what creates consistency without all the micromanagement. And clarity only happens when you decide that culture is just as important as your P&L, your marketing plan, or your operational dashboard. So if your team doesn't feel like it reflects who you are, if the company feels like it's growing faster than its very soul, don't fix the people. Fix the design. Start with conversations that you've been avoiding, the vague expectations that you've tolerated, the behaviors that you've excused because they're just so good at their job. And start by naming what matters. Then back it up with ritual, with reinforcement, with rhythms that don't need your name on them to stay alive. One of the simplest tools I've seen work over and over and over again is this. Ask your team to answer one question every Friday. What did I do this week that reflected our values? They can write it, they can share it in a meeting, they can drop it on a Slack channel. It doesn't matter how they do it. It matters that it's happening. Then they're seeing the culture not as some vague idea, but as a lens through which they can actually lead themselves and others. And when you start seeing them answer that question consistently, thoughtfully, without any prompting, that's when you know your culture is breathing on its own. Now, let me wrap this up with something personal and totally transparent. I didn't always believe culture was something that you could design. For years, I thought it was something that you either had or you didn't. That it came from the people that you hired, that it was luck, chemistry, the result of hiring the right people at the right time. But over time, I started to see the truth. Culture isn't some magical thing. It's math. It's the sum of your patterns. That's when I started working with businesses to install structure, not just around systems, but around values. And that's when I saw the real transformations. Not just better operations, that happened. Not just better margins, trust me, that happened too. But better humans. People who felt proud to work where they worked. People who actually led each other. People who stayed even when those recruiters called to pull them away. That's the kind of business I want you to build. Not a team that needs you. A team that reflects you. That's the shift. From founder-led culture to founder-designed culture. From presence, dependent culture, to process-supported culture. From quiet disconnection to loud alignment. If you want that, if you're tired of being the only one who holds that energy, the standard, the tone, this is your moment. Don't let it pass you by. DM me the word heartbeat. I'll send you our culture continuity kit, the same tool we use to help our empowerment design clients build cultural rituals, behavioral clarity, and reinforcement systems that keep the soul of the company alive, even when the founder steps away. And in our next live, we're taking everything we built so far and we're pushing it one level deeper. You got to come back on Tuesday. Because if you want a team that leads with ownership, you'll need to become a leader who creates space for that leadership to rise. We're going to dive deep into personal leadership mastery next week, the habits, identity, and patterns that drive empowered leadership to the very top. Because your team will never outpace your example. And the next version of your culture, it starts with you. So let's build what lasts together. Come back on Tuesday. Let's go even deeper. I'm so excited. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you on Tuesday.